we're going to move to a side of right-wing commentary that used to be the dominant force, the old guard, that is completely washed now. Ben Shapiro.
Former darling of right-wing media has been under a lot of fire from his right flank, and his once enviable position now seems very precarious. Only 8 years ago, things were dramatically different as Ben Shapiro was making his ascent. Back on November 13th, 2017, an article in the New York Times described conservative commentator Ben Shapiro as the cool kid's philosopher. The article is a relatively gentle profile of Shapiro, describing him as a conservative firebrand who holds extreme views, who is finding a young audience online. There's a part of this article that has an odd echo in the present. It reads, Mr. Shapiro is trying to define conservatism at a time when its meaning is up for grabs, and the Republican Party and traditional conservative media outlets like Fox are built for older audiences. This is even truer now, but the next sentence in the article is even more interesting. Shapiro does not like President Trump, and he disagrees with his old boss at Breitbart News, Stephen K. Bannon, that Trumpism is the future of the Republican Party. Obviously, Ben Shapiro has changed his tune long since then, and that's part of how Shapiro has succeeded, a combination of being morally lucky within the context of conservative politics and willing to sit at the altar of Trump, cashing in on the rightward shift represented by Trump and knowing when to fall in line when he saw.
Except there was one issue where he couldn't fall in line with the broad popular demand from the audience, and that is Israel. It doesn't even matter that Trump is pro-Israel. He could not convince his right-wing fan base to be pro-Israel.
Where that push towards the right was actually coming from. Not people like him, but the constituency more aligned with Donald Trump. This nimble movement helped him ascend the space to be one of the most popular voices in online conservative media in the early 2020s. But his metrics have been way down in 2025. In fact, I suspect further down than the publicly available data suggests. The reasons are many, and ironically, much of it is Shapiro's own making. I want to look through some of that history and explore just how someone can go from being one of the big dogs in the conservative movement to one of its favorite whipping boys. For those somehow unfamiliar with Shapiro's backstory, the very fast version was that he was a young conservative who got a taste of the limelight in conservative commentary before the age of 20. He tried to break into the world of Hollywood and failed.
I've written a couple comedies, kind of hour-long dramedies for, spec script.
And have they been bought?
No.
He helped launch The Daily Wire, a conservative media company that had massive success in its earlier years, although its fortunes have turned as of late. I made a whole video about that if you're curious to learn more. As The Daily Wire weakens as a company, largely as a result of bad business decisions costing them tens of millions of dollars and losing key talent, driving down viewership, being so closely tied to that company has damaged Shapiro's reputation as well. Even though he isn't the CEO who has been driving some of those bad decisions, this company is still very much associated with him as a talent. Where Shapiro stands on a lot of issues hasn't changed much over the years. Going back to that 2017 New York Times article again, his positions are described like this. His views are extremely conservative. Transgenderism is a mental illness, as per the Encyclopedia of Mental Disorders before 2013. Yes, blacks have been historically discriminated against. No, institutions are not broadly discriminated against them today. The rich pay too much tax. Abortion should be illegal. Social Security ought to be privatized and Obamacare repealed. This is something I just want to mention off the top that, while Shapiro is currently losing ground to people more extremely right-wing than he is, back in 2017 he was already considered pretty far-right too. That should tell you a lot about the state of modern conservatism right now, at least in the media space. One key issue is that Shapiro has been a steadfast supporter of Israel, making him vulnerable to criticism as he continues to run cover for the obvious genocide happening in Gaza, a sentiment that became...
It's literally, I'm telling you, I saw this happening and I called it ahead of time, like Babe Ruth. It's Israel. That's it. And if he was Christian and still kind of pro-Israel, but at least could like dance around the issue, he wouldn't have lost as much support. But the very fact that he is openly Jewish and super pro-Israel, like overtly pro-Israel, is precisely the reason. I said this for the last 2.5 years, pretty much. He was already on a downtrend to begin with. Every Republican that would not actively say, not just like Israel is wrong and bad, but also on top of that, even say that Jews are wrong and bad and love Israel, was going to get pounced on.
More popular in mainstream media throughout 2025. In addition to that, there are several prominent right-wing creators, specifically Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens, who very much hold a grudge against Ben Shapiro. As Shapiro's view numbers sharply dropped through 2025, he was motivated to respond to the growing.
Charlie Kirk's method for this was being, not Jewish, he's Christian, but then also really increasing the intensity of his reactionary sentiment on all of the other marginalized identities like black people, immigrants, women, trans people. Like Charlie would try to distract the base by just actively beefing up the whole I just despise all these other different races, I love Donald Trump, all the shit, to try and carry their attention, to try and hold the coalition together. Matt Walsh does the exact same thing, by the way, but more and more people are realizing that Matt Walsh is also kind of fake because he still works for Ben Shapiro. That's the reason why even in the Nick Fuentes video on Piers Morgan, people are shitting on Matt Walsh. Does Matt Walsh even have any motion at all? Out of all the Daily Wire people, Matt Walsh is the only one that still has a little bit of motion. And part of that is because he is not as overtly pro-Israel as these other guys are, but he's also not anti-Israel either. But his avenue basically is everything but the Jews, right? His avenue is hating everyone but Jewish people, right? So I think a lot of the bigots that want bigoted content, that demand bigoted content, still kind of entertain him because at least he's giving them enough hatred for Somalis, hatred for trans people, all this stuff. It's really interesting because if you recall, there was a point in time when Matt Walsh was under a lot of heat from the audience that was like, Matt, you ain't saying nothing about Israel. What's up, Matt? You're still working for Daily Wire, Matt? What's the fuck's going on? And Matt Walsh posted that AI, the white family AI photo that had a sneaky swastika in it. And I don't have evidence for this, but in my headcanon, I know that he went up to Ben Shapiro and was like, listen, I have to post something. I have to post a swastika, please. Don't take it the wrong way. I don't hate the Jews, but I have to do it because people are really, really needing me to say something, or at least dog whistle in that, I gotta deploy a tactical swastika. Did that really happen? Well, the conversation I'm speculating took place, but the fact that Matt Walsh posted an AI video of a white family to say we have to preserve this kind of family in America, and the white family actually had a secret swastika in the AI photo, that is real. That did happen. Oh, here it is. I've been in the middle of some bullshit outrage cycles in my day, but the one that you cooked up this week is probably the fakest of all. There are even controversies hounding me and demanding that I apologize for a hidden swastika someone else posted in a tweet I replied to. Just to be perfectly clear to all the slimy little smear merchants playing this game, I apologize for nothing. I owe you nothing. It was literally fake outrage. He basically threw this out there. I thought you said it was hidden. It is. The image is very clearly designed so that if you squint your eyes, you see the swastika. It is literally one of those squint your eyes to see a hidden prize type shit. Okay? It's one of those magic tricks. Anyway, these people are native to Europe, not the Americas or Africa. Sounds like you need to Google what the word native means. Matt Walsh quote retweeted this and said, people who look like that have been living in the Americas for 5 centuries. If 5 centuries is not long enough to qualify as native, then how long do you need? If the answer is that your ancestors have to actually originate from the place, then nobody's native to anywhere. So where do you draw the line? And then Dreamleaf posted, I like how he pretended not to notice. He did that as a lifeline to maintain his audience.
An alternative in conservative media, one that was growing increasingly hostile towards him. A video from October 30th titled Woke Politics Infected the Far Right is his attempt to explain just what's going on.
You do have one party, the Democratic Party, that has increasingly made it clear that there is a population they do not like, and that population that they apparently do not like is white Christian males. That is the population that must be targeted.
To evidence this claim that the Democrats are targeting white Christian males, he mentions the candidacy of Zoran Mamdani, who was recently elected mayor of New York City. Mamdani received, at best, tepid support for his candidacy from the Democratic Party, even after winning the party's nomination.
What is it, though, that has held you back? I mean, usually this is somebody that won a Democratic primary. It usually wouldn't be that much of a question whether or not, a congressman from the city of New York, the Democratic leader, would endorse him. What's given you pause?
Well, we've had very good conversations over the last few months.
He even had supposed fellow Democratic politician Andrew Cuomo run against him in the general election. Whatever problem Shapiro has with Mamdani, it's incredibly dishonest to present him as a representative of the Democratic Party as a whole, or even someone warmly embraced by the party. It's one of the ironies of Shapiro, though, trying to present the left as being taken over by the extremists when he has folks even further right than him entrenching themselves on the right. Shapiro's other example of the left targeting of white Christian males is even sillier.
You're people of faith. You go to church on Sunday and pray in church on Sunday and pray on people the rest of the week. What is this? What is this?
Right, the kind of scorn that Nancy Pelosi has for religious people, religious conservatives who go to church on Sunday and disagree with her on politics. Well, that has led to a massive backlash.
I don't even know how to respond to this. I'm not even convinced that Pelosi is putting on an accent here, but it does remind me of how Candace Owens will string together nonsense anecdotes like these, attach them to a narrative, and pretend like it's a settled story. Again, another irony considering Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro are very much at odds when their methods are quite similar. He gets sillier later on when he talks about how speaking Spanish is completely fine, but apparently when Mamdani does it, it has an undertone.
If you want to appeal to an audience, speaking to them in their home language is a smart thing to do. But the entire undertone of everything Mamdani does is, I am one of you, right? I am an immigrant. I am not of Western culture.
How does speaking Spanish signal you aren't part of Western culture? The language comes...
Yeah, it's awesome. He just can't hold the coalition. It's also hilarious because Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro agree on pretty much everything. Just like Nick Fuentes and Ben Shapiro agree on pretty much everything, with one exception. And they agree on even bombing Venezuela, for example, right? The only thing that they don't agree on is Israel and Jews. It's a pretty solid exception, it seems. It's such a consequential exception that a lot of these people that spent their whole lives learning about how to be more effective as a racist in the marketplace of ideas from Ben Shapiro have basically all abandoned Ben Shapiro now for the Nick Fuenteses of the world.
From as far west as you can get in Europe, and it's spoken almost exclusively in the Western Hemisphere. What he means by Western culture here, I suspect, is whiteness. It's the only thing I can imagine him meaning because he's certainly not talking about geography. The problem with Shapiro's argument here isn't that it's laughably silly, at least that's not the problem I want to spend much time on. The problem is how similar it sounds to arguments made by white nationalists like Nick Fuentes. Although Fuentes hates Shapiro, I doubt there's much he'd disagree with when it comes to Shapiro criticizing the Democrats for attacking white.
So you're telling me Nazis stopped liking a Jewish man? I mean, if you recall from the Tucker Carlson conversation that Nick Fuentes had, he quite literally said he learned about the Great Replacement, about white people being displaced in the United States of America, a Nazi theory, from Mark Levin, another Jewish man who is a neocon and a huge dick rider for Israel. So yes, a lot of these Nazis don't start off as Nazis, but they do certainly learn a lot of Nazi sentiment from conservative Jews. They learn it from, conservative WASPs and conservative Catholics as well. But this is the one issue where they will always inevitably arrive at the maximalist position where they start blaming the Jews. The Nazis still love a Mexican gay man, a black woman, and a black schizophrenic man. We've reached race-blind Nazism. Yes.
Christian men. It all contributes to the same political project. While
Guys, Ben Shapiro and David Horowitz, rest in piss to David Horowitz, former trot turned neocon, major Islamophobe David Horowitz, are responsible for half of these Nazis' careers. David Horowitz and Ben Shapiro created Candace Owens. Her career was elevated by first David Horowitz, then Charlie Kirk, and then Ben Shapiro.
These guys are openly hostile towards one another. They are very much pushing in the same direction. Shapiro goes into greater detail about how he believes this rise in bigotry on the right arose, and he can only express it in terms where he accuses the left.
So if the left says that white Christian males are the problem, the way that you respond is instead a DEI for precisely the people who are said to be the problem. Right now, the idea is that the systems should only benefit white Christian males.
It's cute that he's trying to rope DEI into all of this because there's actually a term already for what's being tried here, and it's called white supremacy. And trust me, no one from the right got this idea from the left. And I'm sure Shapiro knows that, but he needs to play these word games to massage this civil war within the right as somehow being the left's fault. When you spend your entire career relentlessly attacking the left and excusing the right, he can't even attack the extremists on his side without first pretending like this is somehow the left's fault. When the truth is, if anyone is to blame here, it's people like him who have been turning a blind eye to this growing problem the whole time. Not because he's unaware of it, but because he's ideologically more similar to it than he's willing to admit. There's a great example of Shapiro's own.
Yeah, this whole like, oh, actually the anti-Semitic right is actually the new woke right is so stupid. It was such a desperate attempt to try and hold on to the hemorrhaging base. And it was such an abject failure because like those guys are literally taking the maximalist logical position that you have created your entire world around. Everybody that's not white. And if you are not white, you still have to abide by white supremacist values. In that dynamic, when Jews are also not considered white all of a sudden, why shouldn't you shit on them? You know, especially if you're a Christian, especially if you're Catholic, you're like, America's a Christian nation. America's a white Christian nation. If you're a Christian nationalist, why wouldn't you turn around and say, yeah, and also Jews are also a parasitic force that's destroying the country in the same way that they say about, you know, Mexicans, Guatemalans, black people in general. It is you, Ben Shapiro, that comes across as woke. They look at you and they go, what do you mean? Why are you so woke about Jewish people? Why are you so woke about Israel?
Extreme standards in this very video. He has the audacity to claim that Donald Trump is a normal president.
President Trump is as close to a normie president as we have had in the last several decades, which is bizarre considering, again, his sort of personality. But that is the reality.
Notice how they don't say Judeo-Christian anymore? Yeah, that was another lock that I had, if you recall. I've been saying that for years. I was like, Judeo-Christian, America was founded on Judeo-Christian values, is a relatively new phenomena. What makes you think they'll keep saying that? You had a good run. Post 9/11, it really popped off. And then it took around 25 years for them to decide, no, actually, America's a Christian nation. It's not founded on Judeo-Christian values at all, especially when all of these conspiracy theories end up revolving around a group of shadowy lizard people that are responsible for all the evils that people are experiencing. And it's not like these guys are very invested in finding new narratives. They're going to go back to the one narrative that has remained so successful throughout time, whether it be the pogroms, whether it be in Tsarist Russia, whether it be in Western Europe, Eastern Europe. They're going to go back to the Jews. And they snapped back to that so quickly. I said that so much. I urge you to go back and listen to my Oxford Union speech. If you watch it now with today's perspective, you will see every single thing that I warned against happening in real time.
There are masked men in the streets kidnapping people, labeling them criminals without due process, and deporting them, including some being sent to prisons in other countries. He has imposed sweeping tariffs that are wreaking absolute havoc in the economy. He's handed over health and safety to people who are gutting medical research and spreading misinformation and anti-vax nonsense. I could go on for far longer listing all the very non-normal things he's done, even for someone who supports all this stuff. They should at least be able to acknowledge that this is very much not normal. Donald Trump is not a normal president. Part of Shapiro's problem is that he never allows blame to fall on the Republicans for anything, at least not in a way that is damning enough that someone would decide not to vote for them. One great historic example of Ben Shapiro's blind spot, willful or not, is Candace Owens, although they had a falling out over...
It was not a blind spot at all. Ben Shapiro's former policy that he openly said, by the way, was... as long as you're pro-Israel, I don't give a f*** if you're anti-Semitic. That was his open policy. He has defended people saying anti-Semitic shit over and over again, including Ann Coulter. And it was an inevitability that that policy was going to explode in his face. Ben Shapiro hired Candace Owens long after he knew Candace Owens had said a bunch of anti-Semitic shit. He defended Kanye West when Kanye West was saying anti-Semitic shit. The reason why he did that was because he cared first and foremost about Israel. Here it is. Ann Coulter tweets regarding Jews. Awful, nonsensical. Ann Coulter is also super pro-Israel and has always been so. So I won't lose sleep.
Her opposition to Israel, eventually leading her to being fired, it almost certainly had more to do with her anti-Zionism than her well-known anti-Semitism. Owens got her job at the Daily Wire well after she had made her comments about Hitler's problem was trying to extend his vision outside of Germany.
If Hitler just wanted to make Germany great and have things run well, okay, fine. The problem is that he had dreams outside of Germany. He wanted to globalize. He wanted everybody to be German, everybody to be speaking German, everybody to look at different.
No, totally. It was totally fine if Hitler was doing like a more localized version of the Holocaust. then it would have been totally chill. You know who was sitting next to her when she was making that statement? Charlie Kirk. And for the record, if you were to say, oh, well, how do you expect Ben Shapiro to know everything that she's saying? This was such an insane statement at the time that it literally made its way to Congress. Like there were congressional representatives grilling Candace Owens on this statement.
Wait, that's not, to me, that's not nationalism.
Anyone with a grade school understanding of history should be well aware that Hitler's vision was pretty bad for Germans, too.
Yeah, if he just did Dachau and now Auschwitz, he would have been fine. It's a fantastic take.
Particularly if they were Jewish. Owens also defended Kanye. Hitler's vision was pretty bad for Germans, too, particularly if they were Jewish.
Kirky.
Owens also defended Kanye West while he was first melting down. And in this case, Shapiro joined in, defending him, too. And this was well after it had been established that Kanye West had started hanging out with Nick Fuentes. Here's Ben Shapiro on October 7th, 2022.
I care about the fact that there's more black babies being aborted than born in New York City at this point. That 50% of black death in America is abortion. So I really don't care about people's response to that. I perform for an audience of one, and that's God.
Wow. I mean, frankly, it sounds fantastic. Frankly, Kanye sounds much more sane than virtually everybody else in public life.
No, Ben, don't do that, Ben. Uh-oh, Ben. Ben, you don't realize it's insane not to notice that every single prominent figure that openly loses their minds on the timeline in a very public fashion ends up finding themselves in the throes of right-wing sentiment for some reason. Very strange phenomena. It never goes in the opposite direction. It's always, no one goes, oh yeah, I went insane and became a Maoist or a leftist. It's always, I had an aneurysm and it made me conservative. Interesting stuff.
Shapiro in the October video also made this remark.
The pathologizing of right-wing viewpoints goes back a long way. It goes actually back to a book by Theodore Adorno called The Authoritarian Mind. The suggestion was that there was a pathological drive in capitalist societies that led people to become authoritarian. It was a Marxist view of what America was. And so the idea was that if you were right-wing, you were going to become a fascist.
First, the book is actually called The Authoritarian Personality. I can't say I've read it myself, but it's very funny to me that Ben Shapiro tries to critique its supposed claim of conservatives being more prone to becoming fascists by using the example of Kanye West.
Every human being has something of value that they brought to the table, especially Hitler.
It's very important.
I hate the whole like, oh, I love God, like as though that's the exit ramp. You know, you could just be the most heinous motherfucker of all time. As long as you just say you love God, it's fine. It's like your big cheat code.
To state how completely wrong Ben Shapiro was in this instance. In the same video, he's also responding to an interview Tucker Carlson did with Kanye West, which was later revealed to have edited out various racist conspiracy theories that West had mentioned. Almost as if Carlson does these interviews to help bigots seem less extreme than they
he did. He literally, I called that out at the time too.
Actually are.
I prefer my kids knew Hanukkah than Kwanzaa. At least it will come with some financial engineering.
All of this would, you would think, cause Shapiro to perhaps reflect on the alliances he's made on the right. In the case of Candace Owens, he was willing to look the other way because he was willing to accept a little anti-Semitism if it meant he would have her talents at his disposal at the Daily Wire. In the case of Tucker Carlson, he was a major host on Fox News and a useful ally. So there's a clear advantage to not turning on someone like that, even though he's clearly running cover for someone who holds some very troubling opinions toward Jewish people. This brings us to a major episode in Ben Shapiro's decline, his response to another interview Tucker Carlson had, this time with Nick Fuentes. Tucker Carlson's interview with Nick Fuentes was a gentle one. Fuentes, as usual, went on diatribes about the Jewish community.
They have this international community across borders, extremely organized, that is putting the interests of themselves before the interests of their home country.
Although there was some pushback against Fuentes, Carlson seemed more like he was giving him tips on how to appear more palatable to a wider audience.
But the problem in your response, I get what you're saying, but the problem in your response is it does not apply to every individual.
No, and I would never say that.
Okay. Well, I just think it's important to say that.
There's a presumption in everything Carlson says that he and Nick Fuentes generally agree, but Carlson just wishes Fuentes spoke more delicately about the subject. It both ingratiates Carlson to Fuentes' audience while giving Fuentes mainstream credibility. Oddly enough, in his response to this interview, Ben Shapiro had a similar takeaway.
Probably you came away thinking that, for the most part, Fuentes lives on the radical edge of normality. You think that if you watch the interview, because Tucker Carlson decided that it was important not only to host Fuentes, but to smooth over his views, water them.
Wow, woke. Woke. You're being woke. You want to deplatform someone just because you disagree with them. That's the take, right? That's what you said all the time, Ben. Woke alert. Wee woo, wee woo. No wonder CNN is platforming this dipshit now to offer a lifeline to his dying career. No, he's not grifting to the left. He is still very firmly committed to trying to message to the right, but he's actively hemorrhaging his fan base because everyone knows he's a phony, because the market demands now are increasingly more radical. On the Republican side, they want more. There are no sacred cows. There are no groups, no non-white, non-Christian groups that you can't fucking tackle. So Ben is still trying to be like, no, free market economics, that's what matters. That's why we're doing this. And also shitting on migrants. Shitting on migrants and shitting on trans people. Come on, please, remember that. That's what we care about. But also, please don't direct any of that enmity towards Jews. Please don't do that. And certainly not towards Israel. Hypocrisy farming doesn't work with these assholes, though. They love cancel culture for anyone who doesn't agree with them. Yeah, it doesn't matter, though. In this regard, it's the only type of hypocrisy that does matter, because the market demands more radical commentary. On the right, they demand more radical commentary, and that more radical commentary is shitting on Jews, pinning the blame on Jews, and shitting on Israel as well. Ben Shapiro will do neither. He will actively defend Israel, and therefore, Ben Shapiro has lost his audience.
Them down and make them far more palatable to a normal audience. As we'll discuss in a bit, this is what Tucker Carlson does for a living.
But Ben Shapiro gets off track a little later when he says this.
Now, since his exit from Fox News in 2023, when, of course, he was a very, very popular host, Tucker Carlson has turned himself into a conspiracist and a crank and a pathological liar.
Shapiro would go on to provide some good example of Carlson's show being a mouthpiece for pro-Russia propaganda and conspiracy theories. But what he gets very wrong is that this didn't start when Tucker Carlson left Fox News. He's been doing this for years. A video I made several years back looked at his programming on the Fox Nation streaming service back when he was still at Fox News, and he frequently had fringe right-wing figures on, like the raw egg nationalist. That was part of a special about how men's health can be improved by drinking raw eggs and shining red light on your balls. This is, of course, just the tip of a very bizarre iceberg. He would talk about everything from alien abductions to the danger of wind turbines. And the white nationalist connection doesn't just come from the occasional guest. His top writer at the time, Blake Neff, was forced to resign after he was exposed posting racist and sexist comments online for years, and he bragged about smuggling some of that into Tucker Carlson's scripts. And it's very well documented that white nationalists often tuned into Tucker Carlson when he was on Fox News.
Bro, this is like a recap and a summarization of my last 10 years of commentary, I swear to God.
Taking notes on how to more effectively phrase their own beliefs because he was so good at streamlining them into mainstream conversations. Tucker Carlson has been swimming in these waters for a long time. Oh, just a side note, if you're wondering what happened to that head writer, Blake Neff, after he was forced to resign from Tucker Carlson's show, he got a job at Turning Points USA. Just thought I should mention that. When Tucker Carlson was fired from Fox News in 2023, Ben Shapiro's pal and former Daily Wire CEO Jeremy Boring made a comment about how they'd love to hire him. Ben Shapiro at the time had expressed disagreements with Carlson over foreign policy, but did describe him like this.
Whatever Tucker is, he is certainly a compelling presence, and he does, when it comes to social issues particularly, have an extraordinary amount of moral clarity.
And he criticized the media's commentary on Carlson.
The Times did an investigation into how Tucker Carlson stoked white fear to conquer cable. This, of course, is their routine, is that anybody they don't like is a white supremacist.
This really captures the bind Shapiro finds himself in. His criticisms of Carlson in the...
Yeah. If you prime your audience into thinking that every racist person is good and that anytime someone actually calls out their bigoted opinions is actually they're bad, why wouldn't they also have anti-Semitic opinions as well? You can't just snap out of it just for anti-Semitism. Everyone's going to go, what the f***? do you mean?
Present are solid, but he's also pretending that this is somehow new. When the truth is, it's not that Carlson has changed, it's just a lot of this is starting to hit Ben Shapiro more directly.
There's two factors at play here. It isn't just Israel. Israel's the final blow. But these guys were already losing their audiences before Israel. And the reason why they were losing their audiences before Israel is because of anti-intellectualism. All the way throughout Gamergate and onward, leading into like the 2020s, Republicans on the internet wanted someone to come across as smart. But the reason why the intellectual dark web fell and the Jordan Petersons of the world fell and the Ben Shapiros of the world lost their relevance is because they were presenting a nerdy ass version of right-wing sentiment. It was actually Andrew Tate that kind of busted this. When Andrew Tate came into the fold and presented an openly anti-intellectual argument that was slammed with machismo and more focused on the aesthetics of being a man, guys like Ben Shapiro were seen as boring losers. People wanted more. People wanted someone that was more charismatic. People wanted someone that was more fun to watch, easier to consume. I assume that short form content also played a big role in this as well, as people's attention spans have shortened. They wanted something like high impact and super fast. They wanted a jock. And they didn't even care if this jock was not demonstrating traditional values necessarily. He was a pimp. None of that mattered for this new crop of young men that only cared about the drama, that were only invested in the drama of it all and the constant antagonism of it all. They found someone who was better at trolling and owning the libs.
It's that interview with Nick Fuentes that really seems to have brought things to a head. For those who don't know, Nick Fuentes has hated Ben Shapiro for many years, in part because of Shapiro being Jewish, but also because he sees Shapiro as someone who undermined his career. In his interview with Tucker Carlson, Fuentes described how Shapiro was initially an inspiration for him.
We do this debate about Trump versus Hillary. And so I'm there and I'm pro-Trump and I say, I think Trump's going to win. And I'm straight up like ripping the Ben Shapiro talking points.
This admiration didn't last as, according to Fuentes, Shapiro publicly called him out over some of his takes regarding Israel. If Nick Fuentes said the sky was blue, I'd stick my head out the window to double check, so it's important not to take it on faith that he's being honest in any of this. But what is easily verifiable is that he has been talking shit about Ben Shapiro for many years now, including one very messed up incident where he confronted Shapiro in public while he was out with his family. Although Fuentes and Shapiro insist none of this is personal, it's hard not to notice that Ben Shapiro had for years avoided calling out Tucker Carlson this aggressively, and now he's saying stuff like this.
Tucker Carlson, for example, would never say out loud what Nick Fuentes does. He wouldn't say the things many of his guests say. And so instead, he acts as an ideological launderer. He takes other people's hideous ideas, he softens them, he treats them with love and care, and then he provides them with a massive signal boost. He isn't merely talking to people in good faith, of course. He's promoting certain people and ideas and attacking others.
And Shapiro goes so far as to point out how even Nick Fuentes can see how Tucker Carlson...
Ben Shapiro, if this wasn't about Israel and anti-Semitism, would be saying the exact opposite. He'd be yelling at the left, saying the things that Ben Shapiro is saying and go, this is guilt by association. Why can't we have a normal, honest conversation with people that we disagree with? That's what he'd be saying. So his audience is probably expecting that. The audience that remains.
Is a fraud.
And after years of bragging about being an elite, bragging about being so out of touch and so rich, now he's going to be the spokesperson for all the white people. Now he's going to roll up his sleeves. I just like to hunt and fish in my log cabin. I care about Klarna and credit card debt.
And now Ben Shapiro is very much on board with the idea that Tucker Carlson is spreading the same ideology as Nick Fuentes, which is especially ironic considering just a few years ago, he put out a video titled Tucker Carlson is not Nick Fuentes, where he defends Carlson when his rhetoric was compared to Fuentes's.
That this is a godless country. I hate it.
You're right. They're godless. That is exactly right. I never talk like that. But it's
Okay, pause it
true.
right there. Okay, so again, this idea that if you say that God has gone absent from the public square, that you're in league with Nick Fuentes. No, Nick Fuentes literally says that he wants a Catholic dictatorship in the United States. That is not the same thing as what Tucker Carlson is saying. This is the stupidest game.
It's incredible that not even 3 years later, Ben Shapiro is going after Tucker Carlson for being aligned with Nick Fuentes when he was criticizing The Daily Show for noticing patterns in their rhetoric. I want to highlight another part of the Carlson interview of Fuentes that might explain the phenomena going on here.
when you get attacked, when people call you names, like they always called me racist, and I would always think to myself, I'm actually not. Maybe the point is to make me racist. Where you just get to a point where you're like, well, if you're going to slander me, then I'll just become the thing you're calling me. I do think that's a feature of human nature, don't you?
This is, of course, a deeply silly thing to say. It's basically recreating that webcomic of someone who said they had no choice to become a Nazi because someone made a comment about Trump supporters being racist. Ben Shapiro said as much when Megyn Kelly asked him about it.
I'm a little tired of the excuse that if you are called something enough, that justifies all of the subsequent activity. I've been called every goddamn name in the book. Every name in the book, and I have not, but I have not shifted my positions because people call me names. That is a childish thing to do.
He's
I agree. Wow.
Absolutely right here. And one thing I noticed that every time I agreed with Ben Shapiro on something, it's when he was saying things people on the left have been saying for years, which honestly speaks to how effective we are at criticizing the right, whether they acknowledge it or not. Tucker Carlson plays the same game. Recently, Ben Shapiro made some comments about retirement that went viral.
No one in the United States should be retiring at 65 years old.
That was a classic free market capitalism advocacy moment from Ben. I love when these guys get honest, dude. You are not going to ever retire, and you are going to like it. You're going to eat the bugs.
Frankly, I think retirement itself is a stupid idea unless you have some sort of health problem.
Tucker Carlson responded to that, sounding a lot like someone on the left.
Poorer people, working class people, blue collar people are aching. They have trouble walking. Their backs hurt. So retirement for a man who climbs ladders is a little bit different from a man who hosts a podcast.
Carlson even brought up the impact of systemic failures.
We are subject to forces that we can't control. It's just a fact. I didn't write the tax code, for example. I don't have any control over the hiring standards at various companies or the admission standards at various schools. Those are systemic problems. It's just a fact.
This is another one of Carlson's well-worn strategies, to make a systemic critique, while his solution typically involves demonizing immigrants and other vulnerable groups. It's something he's done time and time again, and honestly, only a sucker would fall for this sort of scam, and he's been pulling it for years. What's even more ridiculous about Tucker Carlson's criticism of Ben Shapiro's rhetoric around retirement is that none of this is new. Shapiro was saying this at least a year and a half ago. It's hard to imagine these guys have only recently noticed these things about one another and were either too cowardly to mention them before or perhaps saw more professional advantage in staying quiet. It really speaks to what opportunists they are. And I want to go back to that video from October where
I personally love watching right-wingers fight one another. It's awesome.
Ben Shapiro was complaining about woke politics infecting the far right.
The Democratic Party has been playing with these forces for so long.
Then you leave a comment like, all of these people are trash. Yeah.
It's now too late for them to dissociate from those forces.
One of the big complaints he has about figures like Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes is that they push anti-Semitism. But back in 2011, Ben Shapiro tweeted this: "The Jewish people has always been plagued by bad Jews who undermine it from within. In America, those bad Jews largely vote Democrat." In his book, Primetime Propaganda, the true Hollywood story of how the left took over your TV, he described how liberal Jewish people had taken over Hollywood to advance a left-wing agenda. He's also run cover for the Great Replacement theory, trying to detach it from its anti-Semitic origins into a more pliable concern over how...
Yep. You taught the next crop of Nazis the Great Replacement theory, and all it took for them was to read one extra theme about how Jews are responsible for the Great Replacement and how Jews are responsible for wokeness running amok and destabilizing Western civilization, and they all turned on you. Good job, Ben. You did it.
Demographics impact voting. There's something very unsettling about how Ben Shapiro was perfectly happy to point the finger at bad Jews, but somehow thinks it's the left that's convincing parts of the right that there's some kind of Jewish problem. He seemed unaware of the fact that there are actually some pretty powerful anti-Semitic forces on the right that have been there for a very long time, and maybe the reason they liked him is because they found him kind of useful. It's a bit of a tired point, but it hasn't stopped being true. Ben Shapiro is being devoured by the monsters he helped protect, and I suspect it's happening more aggressively than people might expect. While looking at some of Ben Shapiro's recent videos, I couldn't help notice that the metrics seemed a bit off. For example, his long-form videos do very well, but his clips have dreadful numbers in comparison, something that historically hasn't been true for his channel. If we look on Social Blade, we can see a large drop-off in viewership.
Oh, goddamn. Oh my Lord.
Over the past year. So at first glance, it seems as though his current audience, what remains of it anyway, has a very different viewing habit than his old audience. I wanted to look closer at what might be happening, so I decided to graph out what was publicly available with some comparisons. In this first series of graphs, I'm counting views in 100s to compare them with the total number of comments. The reason I'm counting views like this is because it makes the graph read a little better visually, and since I'm doing it for each graph, the presentation of data is consistent. Looking at Ben Shapiro's long-form videos, there is a big disparity between the number of comments and the number of views, especially when we compare the number of comments to his short-form videos, where they track much more closely. If we compare him to other channels...
Where's the dip coming from? Oh, this is all 2025 numbers. Never mind. Oh, wait, here it is. 2023, October. You can kind of map out this trend here, interestingly enough. Picking up steam here, picking up steam. And then kind of feels like it's all down since then. I wonder what happened. I guess he too had October 7 levers, but he never ended up recovering from the October 7 levers. I guess his October 7 levers were leaving for a different reason.
Presentation of data is consistent. Looking at Ben Shapiro's long-form videos, there is a big disparity between the number of comments and the number of views, especially when we compare the number of comments to his short-form videos, where they track much more closely. If we compare him to other channels, in this case I chose Candace Owens and Matt Walsh, we can see that Shapiro's long-form videos are getting much less engagement. And if we go back in time to January of 2025, Shapiro's long-form videos are a bit closer. There is still a gap, though not quite as big. If we calculate the odds of whether or not a view will lead to someone leaving a comment, we can see Ben's long-form videos are far less likely to have its viewers leave a comment under them, clocking in at less than 0.3% of viewers leaving comments, slightly more than half of what his videos used to get, and far behind Matt Walsh and Candace Owens, who get 3 and 5 times as many respectively. And keep in mind that of all of these channels, Ben Shapiro is the only one who doesn't do a premiere for his longer videos, where the earliest viewers are sounding off in the chat rather than leaving comments under the video. In fact, Ben Shapiro used to do premieres, which might explain why his older long-form videos had so few comments. We can see this pattern repeat itself when it comes to the number of likes left on videos. With all the other types of videos I looked at, the number of likes were significantly worse. Viewers are 3, 4, and even 5 times less likely to click on that like button for Ben Shapiro's long videos than viewers of his long-form videos back in January or videos from Candace Owens and Matt Walsh. What all of these numbers amount to is, in my mind, 2 likely conclusions. Ben Shapiro's long-form videos are being heavily inflated by people who are only showing up to hit the dislike button or nothing at all. And if they're leaving comments, those comments are being deleted. The alternative is that someone is botting his long-form videos, giving it inflated view numbers and very anemic engagement. Whichever of those 2 conclusions is more accurate, it doesn't look like a healthy channel at all. I should mention that in my calculations, I did omit one video from Ben Shapiro's channel, the November 3rd one, titled Tucker Carlson Sabotages America. That one actually has metrics that reflect something that has nearly 1 million views, and it's also the one that has the most negative comments towards him. It seems like Ben Shapiro's only means of getting big numbers of engaged viewers these days is by being a lightning rod for hate. While we're talking about data, though, I also wanted to share some info I came across from Open Measures that attempted to gauge Nick Fuentes' growing profile and how it doesn't quite match the narrative around his ascent. Although Fuentes saw a massive spike in social media chatter about him after Charlie Kirk's murder, that growth has largely gone down. The Tucker Carlson interview didn't move the needle in nearly the same way. Most of the time Fuentes gets hyped up, people cite his Rumble stats, but it's something of an open secret at this point that Rumble's numbers are almost certainly bogus. My own investigation a while back found they were inflating their live stream view counts, and I would be shocked if that was the only metric that was being fudged over there. I say all of this to remind everyone that these figures we're talking about today are incredibly niche. For fun, let's go to Ben Shapiro for that.
Every big audience in the media, you're talking about 3, 4 million people. The electorate in the United States is generally about 160 million people. I think one of the mistakes politicians make is they look at X and they say, this is representative of the American body politic. And that is just too online. It's just way too online.
To conservative politics, I think reflects how terminally online politics has become now. Further getting detached from real people and instead being obsessed with these internet celebrities as if they've somehow permeated the mainstream when really they're big names within a small conservative online media space. At some point, Donald Trump is going to retire from public life, likely due to failing health. And right now, his cult of personality is the one thing uniting a lot of disparate parts of the right wing. This is something Ben Shapiro is well aware of.
I think that there are a lot of people who are planning for the post-Trump era, and they're trying to make moves right now in order to sort of consolidate their viewpoint in the post-Trump era.
Ben Shapiro represents the old guard of traditional conservatives, the former far right, before they are outflanked by an even more extreme America First movement, often associated with Shapiro's rivals, including Nick Fuentes and, to an extent, Tucker Carlson. It's not a coincidence that Carlson suggests that Fuentes has already won this fight.
And Ben Shapiro seems irrelevant to me now?
Now, but back then, for the young,
guess that's
was huge.
true.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you won.
Oh, certainly.
The truth is probably more complicated, especially since it's hard to get trustworthy numbers for all of this. But for a political party that seems to be terminally online, it's not surprising that popular sentiment on the internet can be used to fuel a movement. It remains to be seen if it can actually translate to electoral success, though. One of the keys to Ben Shapiro's success online is that he's been able to avoid or build alliances with people who clearly don't like him. Alliances that would never work long term, but I suspect he thought he could get ahead of. As public opinion has shifted rapidly against Israel, it's become increasingly difficult for someone like Shapiro to continue his vocal support for the country. Many on the right have used this opportunity to smuggle their anti-Semitism into the broader criticism against Israel, but Shapiro can't make that move. Back in 2024, Ben Shapiro and his father, a Hollywood composer, produced a musical in Israel that paired the October 7th attack with the Warsaw Uprising. It was called We Will Rise. Speaking to the Jerusalem Post, he said, "The ending is the most powerful part for me. The characters from the Warsaw Ghetto sing 'We Will Rise' as they move through the fog, but now they're joined by the Israeli soldiers who realize that their fight is the same. The fight to protect the Jewish people is timeless." Putting aside the grotesque pairing of the genuinely heroic uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto with the soldiers committing a genocide, what we see is that this is something Ben Shapiro genuinely believes in. He's a man who has a real passion for at least some of what he talks about, and I think that might ultimately be his downfall. While he was willing to make cheesy YouTube videos for clicks or endorse politicians he has serious misgivings about, there are some lines he won't cross when it comes to some of his values. In this case, it means defending a country committing a genocide, which is tragic in its own right. But in the world of conservative media, not being able to sell out your supposed values makes you vulnerable. Going back to the New York Times article, it's hard to imagine Ben Shapiro pivoting to be on the friendly side of the increasingly extreme right-wing base the way he had 8 years ago. Mostly because he didn't really have to give anything up. He just had to pretend he liked Donald Trump. And Ben Shapiro was certainly tolerated and even celebrated because he was useful for attacking the left. But attacking the left while ignoring the far right only works when the far right isn't breathing down your neck in public awareness and pulling ahead in view counts. While I think Ben Shapiro's profile has been dragged down, I doubt he'll be completely finished forever. Careers in media can slump along if someone has a devoted enough base, and Shapiro still has some kind of audience keeping him afloat. A couple of years from now, it'll be interesting to see if he's found life in a new lane of political relevance, or if the times will pass him by and he'll end up forgotten, like pundits of the past, such as Bill O'Reilly. In the meantime, we can enjoy insightful interviews from Tucker Carlson, where he asks tough questions like this.
What is porn exactly? Like, describe how available is porn? What is it?
This was incredible. This was an incredible video. Another banger from José. Go like and subscribe. Go show José some love. The right-wing downfall continues.